Okay. Hello, everyone. We are very happy to see so many people here and very glad you found the way to the studio, even though the elevators tried or made it harder for you. Welcome to this edition of Loops. My name is Yannis, and there you can see Sarah. We are both studying here in the master's program Design and Computation and are moderating today's session. For those of you who are here for the first time, Loops is our event series here at New Practice, initiated together with the Berlin University Alliance and now supported by the Projekt Zukunft of the state of Berlin. Today, we welcome Malte Engeler and Tante, who join us for a conversation on fascist AI and its cyber-libertarian roots. And just for the time structure of the event, today will go a little bit different than usual. We have a 15-minute input by Malte, followed by a really short round for any questions regarding understanding. But then we quickly move on to Tante's 50-minute input. Another quick round of any understanding questions, like is everything clear? Did you hear something, or is there a definition missing? And then we'll end with a 25-minute discussion. And after that, we invite you all to have a drink at the bar and discuss even more and stick around and talk to each other. And we also have this loop in the center, and it will indicate the time, and you will see how long the session will still take and when it's finished. Also an invitation to the speakers to stick to the loop. Okay, and with that, I would like to introduce our first speaker, Malte Engeler. Malte is co-founder of Structural Integrity, a radically needs-oriented digital policy collective. He conducts research on topics related to data law, the post-capitalist data economy, and solidarity-based digital policy. His professional background is in data protection law. And with that, I hand over to Malte.
My 15 minutes don't start before check. Okay. Yeah. Hello, everyone. Thanks for having us. Today's topic is fascist AI. Tante and I, we have split the topic up. I will do part one, basically how did we get here? How did capitalism shape what technology we have, especially AI, and how does that relate to fascism? And then he in part two will build on that and talk about the actors of AI fascism in detail. As I just said, I want to start with how did we get here? How did we end up with AI or technology in general, for that matter? And I guess sometimes you meet people that will try to convince you that technology is a force of nature, that technology is a synonym for progress, that technological innovation is a social value in and on itself. I think that's wrong. The technology that we have in whatever kind of society we live in is always the result of the social and economic conditions we are living in. And the conditions we are living in right now is a capitalist society. So if we want to understand why we have the technology that we have to start with capitalism. And if you're wondering yourself, well, I got to a talk about fascist AI, now we talk about capitalism. It's not capitalist AI, is it? I mean, I would like to answer that question with a famous quote from Max Horkheimer, who famously at the eve of World War II said, "Those who are not willing to talk about capitalism should stay quiet when it comes to fascism." I think that's very, very accurate because there are strong ideological ties and links between neoliberalism, which is the ideology on the basis of capitalism, and fascism. And don't take my word for it. Whenever I quote people, I try to give literature that you can look up. These two books I can highly recommend, but there will be a slide at the end with all the literature I would recommend if you want to go deeper. So let's talk about capitalism. Sometimes when people talk about capitalism, they use it rather vaguely, and they say it's basically a synonym for greedy people or lust for money. I don't think that's true. That's not capitalism. That's basically cliches. No, capitalism is a system that shapes our reality, our social interactions, our economy. And while it's a really obviously vast and complex topic, capitalism can, I think, be defined by three key aspects, and that are private property, labor exploitation, and profit-driven competition. What does it mean? Private property basically means that whatever we need to survive, to sustain ourselves, to reproduce our life, to eat, to have shelter, healthcare, is owned by private individuals. Natural resources, corporation, land can be owned by individual persons. They are ownable. They are able to be property. And this kind of property means that they can do with their property whatever they want. That's absolute power, basically like the feudal absolute power in the past. The other people, we don't have what we need to reproduce our life. We cannot go out and harvest something that we can eat. The only thing of value that we have is our lifetime and our body. So we go to those that have private property, the means to reproduce our society, and sell them our body and our lifetime as labor to the capitalist. They then, whatever we create as value, they pick that up and they go to a market and they compete there for profit, selling what we created with our labor. But they obviously have to compete with other capitalists, so they have to increase profit and decrease labor costs. So in capitalism, there's an inbuilt incentive to decrease labor costs or to automate, so to get rid of labor costs altogether. And when we look at this kind of social society, we see that technical innovation is basically the result of capitalists improving the conditions for the profit accumulation. And if you want to read up on that wonderful thesis, I just read it, I can only recommend it highly. I think that's not really hard to understand. I mean, if you look around the technology that we have in our daily lives, the fact that we have a smartphone, that computation in our societies is distributed decentrally in our pockets with a compute power higher than the computer that brought astronauts to the moon, that's not the result of any natural law of innovation or a natural force of technical progress. It's a decision by capitalists because they realize that's a market, that's a profit. That's why we have smartphones. I mean, you can look at how in capitalism, property and ownership needs to be safeguarded. So we have technologies like digital rights management, we have the blockchain, we have Web3. I don't know if you remember the hype about Web3. Web3 basically was a project to make everything on the internet property and the commodity, to turn everything in the internet into something that can be owned. And based on this kind of understanding of capitalism, we can now look at why do we have AI. And when I talk about AI, I always have to say so-called AI, but then I would have like 10 minutes more time that I would need. So whenever I say AI, I'm obviously referring to so-called AI, and in particular, I'm talking about large data models. So quick reminder, and I'm referring to the book by Emily Bender and Alex Hanna here, who just published it. AI basically is a technology that recognizes patterns in data via machine learning. It builds probability stochastic models of what input correlates to what output, and then it can create likely outputs to new input based on the learned patterns. It needs huge data sets, basically the knowledge and creativity of the internet, and then we have private corporations who are now trying to make up any use case they can because they have to sell this kind of technology to us to make a profit. And building on that, I would say we can see how the capitalist DNA in AI is very visible. The corporations behind these models and the product based on AI, they are privately owned for-profit commercial giants. They are not democratically governed. We cannot say, please don't use your resources for something else. They are deciding because they are owners of whatever resources they control. They decide what the resources are used for. They decide that they want to spend $600 billion on data centers. We cannot say, well, we don't really need bad data centers. We need, I don't know, heat pumps. That's like the ownership part in AI. And the other ownership part is that they have turned what has been more or less a public resource into something that's now in the realm of corporate property. The process of propertization, of turning something into a commodity under capitalism, is what we see in AI, how they took what is basically a common good, the internet, the knowledge of the internet, the creativity of the internet, and turned it into private property by turning it into an AI model. And the product that the AI companies are selling is automation. Basically, that's wage pressure. It gives your boss an excuse to force you to work for less or work harder at the same time, because he can threaten you that he will replace you with automation, in this case AI. And even if the promise of increased efficiency with AI is not really coming true, it's still a threat. And that's basically the product is threat. And it's a weapon for your boss to shift control over the process of production to the side of management and away from workers. And obviously, AI training runs on the masses of exploited workers. And I said that once before, and I say it again, there is no AI, only other people's work, and these people usually aren't white. And that brings us back to the colonial and racist foundation of capitalism, always a part of capitalism, and that brings us to the fascist part. And when we talk about fascism, we obviously have to define what we're talking about. And I will use, I think that's basically a consensus, a new consensus, what defines capitalism, and that's something like a palingenetic ultranationalism. What does it mean? Palingenetic means that a nation has an inherent greatness that needs to be reborn rather violently. There's a return to former glory. And the ultranationalism part means that belonging to a community is not defined by equality or citizenship, but by belonging to a rather small, homogeneous ethnic group. And I am using that definition that was introduced by Roger Griffin, one of the most famous fascism researchers, and also by Dan McQuillan, whose book, Resisting AI, I cannot recommend highly enough to read. So, building on that, we can look at the capitalism to AI to fascism pipeline. Again, when we look at the technical foundation of AI, we have a technology that builds on centralized compute power. It's recombining data points from the past to output the average, most expected result while being a black box. We can only see what goes in and what goes out. We cannot see what the machine learning, deep learning model exactly is doing. When you look at capitalism, we can see that capitalism really loves AI because centralized compute is very in line with the desire to have private control. It's something we can easily privately control in form of data centers and models. The recombination data points part is what I just described. The automation and efficiency part is basically making it possible that you can hire less skilled workers because you can automate more and replace the workers more easily because you don't have to train them as hard. And outputting the most average, most expectable result, I mean, have you ever looked at pop culture? That's like capitalism loves that, mass appeal, familiarity. That's also fantastic for capitalism. And the black box part, again, what happens when something that ChatGPT produces is wrong? Who has to pay the costs? We as a society. The bias and the wrong products are risk that we as a society have to carry, but the profits are privatized. So capitalism and AI are very much in line and very like each other very much. Now look at fascism. When you look at fascism, you can see that there's also a strong link between both. The centralized compute is obviously something fascism loves a lot. What is the entrepreneur in capitalism is the emperor in fascism, absolute power. It's both have that some kind of in them. And the recombining data points from the past part, well, AI is an inherently conservative technology. It can only reproduce what it has already seen. So it's inherently conservative. And that's like what I just said, the palingenetic part, building on something that is some kind of inherent but buried in the past and needs to be rebuilt rather violently. Outputting the average, most expectable result way for fascism, AI is a homogenization machine. It turns the diversity of our society, of our humanity, into a very narrow average result, and that's very much in line with the ideology of a rule superiority of a small homogenic ethnicity. And the black box part, well, if you look at the genocide in Gaza, you can see that AI is a perfect tool to mask inhuman acts of violence. With a layer of supposed rationality, the Israeli government can point to the computer, who then says, well, the computer said so, that's a terrorist, and then they have a rationality behind killing civilians. And the fact that capitalism produces this kind of technology is not by accident. When we look around in capitalism, there is an obvious inequality. It's a society that's built upon superiority of few over many. Many of us are exploited, some get rich. But to cope with that society, to live in that society, to be able to not go insane in this kind of society, we have to numb ourselves. We have to develop things that make it easy for us to cope with that. So we develop ideologies like racism and sexism to make us somehow be okay with the fact that people of color and female care work is reduced. And this kind of inherent discrimination between humans, in capitalism it works to justify the accumulation of profit. In fascism it's turned to 11 and it's basically in its purest form. So to sum it up, AI is a perfect example for the capitalism to fascism pipeline. It embodies capitalism and carries the seed of fascism. And a perfect example for that, and that I will use to give over to Tante, is a quote from Alexander Karp, the CEO of Palantir, who in his just published book in the preface said the software industry should rebuild its relationship with government and redirect its effort and attention to reconstructing the technology and artificial intelligence capabilities. The engineering elite of Silicon Valley has an affirmative obligation to participate in the defense of the nation and the articulation of a national project. What is this country? What are our values? And for what do we stand? So basically, Alexander Karp is saying, capitalism, get in line with the new Völkisch project of the United States. And with this, I leave you with Tante after some clarifying questions. Thank you. And if you want to take a picture that's like the literature, I would recommend you if you want to go deeper.
Okay, thank you, Malte. We would like to give you the chance to ask questions if there are any problems of understanding, but nothing to open up a big discussion because this will come afterwards. But if there's a simple question, then please.
Just point of clarity, are you saying that AI is inherently fascist? There's no such thing as a non-fascist AI?
No, I'm not saying that AI is inherently fascist. I would say that it's a technology that's very much in line and carries the seed of fascism in it.
What a sad slide to have this computer stuck on it.
Great. Well, thank you. Now coming to the second speaker, we're happy to welcome Tante. Tante is an independent computer scientist, sociotechnologist, and Luddite. His work focuses on the entanglement of the technological, the social, and the political. And now the stage is yours.
Thank you. Yes, there's the slide again. I debillionaired my infrastructure, so I'm doing this all with LibreOffice, and it seems to be wonky on Apple hardware. I don't know what that tells us about big corporations and whatever. So yeah, following up on Malte's work, I wanted to talk a bit about a strand of fascism that's very prominent right now and how it connects to ideas of cyber libertarianism, but also AI. Like, there's another path into the darkness. I'm great for parties. I always bring the mood up. Fascism is super en vogue these days. We've already seen the slide. We have it in the US, we have it in Germany, in Hungary, but all over the planet. Like Modi in India, we have El Salvador and other countries in South America. We have it everywhere. It seems to be very popular these days. And everyone probably, this is a bit annoying, but okay. But everyone probably remembers this picture from the inauguration of Donald Trump, where all the big tech CEOs except for Sam Altman, because Elon Musk hates his guts, were present, were invited to bend the knee to the new ruler and give him a lot of money for his party, of course. And it's not just US parties, like US companies, German companies also bent the knees, like T-Mobile and SAP killed their DEI programs because, of course they did, because they're motherfuckers. But basically every tech oligarch worth their salt was there to kiss the ring. And as Malte already said, Alex Karp is not just there to kiss the ring. Alex Karp has a hard time to give an interview these days where he's not fantasizing about killing people. Like it's really hard for him. It seems to be an issue for him. Like whenever he talks anywhere, even in like investor calls, he talks about how they should kill more people and that Palantir needs to kill people, which is a shift. Like 2-3 years ago, Palantir always presented themselves as we're just giving intelligence, very passive, we're just helping police make things secure, but now it's about violence. It's about enacting violence and supporting enacting violence on people, ideally people with darker skin than Alex Karp has. And it's always for America, as Malte's quote earlier also said. It's always about the national project that tech now needs to get in line with. And we also see that not just from the CEO level, like middle management people in US tech companies are these days moving over to the military. And not just in like the military hires them as contractors. No, they join the military as in the ranks of majors and whatever. And now tech people work in the army to make killing people more efficient. And they see that as their obligation. It's not just a job that gives them money. It's their obligation to serve the national project. And it's not just people from Palantir. You have people from Meta. You have people from all the big tech companies moving over there, while still being at the tech companies. I mean, they're still drinking latte and typing around on a MacBook, but they're now with the army and pushing buttons to kill people. And all of that is very much traditional fascism. Like Malte explained, capitalist and fascist logic has always fit quite well together, and we have seen that in history, capital will align with fascism because it's always very profitable. It works. Like we had ThyssenKrupp in Germany in the 30s, and now we have Google and Microsoft doing the same in the US. It's a pattern we know. And this traditional fascism is characterized, I have smaller words than Malte does, but like for people who just want to, just to bring everyone in line, like patterns that you see in fascists are like all the same narratives that we see today with Donald Trump, for example. It's always very hierarchical. You always have a leader at the top, which is the result of a hierarchical structure based on dominance. You always have this appeal to the restoration of the glorious past with Donald Trump. That is not even subtext. It's "Make America Great Again." Like it's literally in the title of everything, even though no one can say when that was. Like it's a mythical past that needs to be brought back. It's basically fascist fan fiction for how the past supposedly was. You have turning to violence and dominance, which we see in Alex Karp and many other people talking about how we need to kill more people, how we need to make weapons more efficient, and how even people who are not in the US government talk about people migrating to the US, like the crisis at the border that even the media is picking up, where everyone who has a brown skin is depicted as like zombies that are trying to take over the US. And we see that in the way that cruelty is expressed, how you can hurt people, putting them in cages right now, in the alligator concentration camps that they're now building, or how you hurt trans kids or whatever, whoever you can hurt, and how everyone's very proud of themselves when doing that. It contains the calls for racial homogenization, deport migrants, yada yada, we know the story, and it stands against communism, against pluralism, against democratic ideals of traditional liberal values. Those are framed as alien, as foreign, as degenerate. They are not part of the good past that we want to get back to. And all this leads to the destruction of structures that come from those ideologies. Like if you think of liberal ideologies in democracy have led to like the rule of law, courts checking power of the government, and independent media trying to check power. All these structures need to go, because they're bad. And one of the structures that also needs to go, this is basically just me sneaking in a reading recommendation, is also art. the fact that AI is being used to devalue art, and the fact that every artist's work is being taken to then produce propaganda for a fascist state, that's not by accident. That is intentional. There's this violence that is done to artists who are often more liberal, more about pluralism. The violence against artists is also the point. It's a great essay that I can totally recommend. But if you want to know more about that, Roland Meyer is here. He knows everything about this. But I think this is very much the traditional fascism, but there's a new way today. There's a new kid in town, basically, a new strand of fascism, or basically a new way of talking about fascism, about bringing it forward. And I call that tech fascism. And it's not just fascism that tech people support. That's traditional fascism. Capitalists love fascists. That's what we already know. But it's a new kind of narrative that shifts a few core ideas around and makes their origin harder to trace. But a thing that I want to make clear, this is not a different thing. It's a different path to go to fascism. We have the classical fascism, which is often seen, which we already know, and the tech fascism has a bit of a different bend to it, but it has the same goals. Tech fascists are fascists. They both want anti-democratic, homogeneous, anti-pluralist, hierarchical societies based on dominance and violence. So how does this new narrative path look, and what did it change? Well, fascist arguments are by definition vulgar and inhumane and cruel. That's the point of it. But with many people who are not fascists, that triggers like safeguards. We've learned that this is, when somebody talks about how the Jews are controlling the world or how black people are destroying society, this triggers something in us. We learn, warning signs. We need to stop this, and we need to shut this down. At least those of us who've spent some time in school not asleep. So what this new narrative path allows is to get to the same goal of fascism without triggering these safeguards. It's a different way to talk about fascism and to bring fascism forward. And to get to understand how that works, we need to look at the two core texts that basically define this movement, even though it's not a structured movement as such yet. One is Balaji Srinivasan's Network State, and the other is Mark Andreessen's Techno-Optimist Manifesto. Like, these two texts don't just illustrate how fascist narratives define a lot of tech thinking these days, but tech people read these books not knowing that they are fascist and start integrating these lines of thinking into their own thinking. So let's first talk about, and I'm sorry, about the network state. The network state was written by Balaji Srinivasan and is unreadable drivel. It's garbage, but sadly very influential garbage. Balaji was a partner at Andreessen Horowitz, which is a big venture capital fund, and the CTO at Coinbase, which is a crypto trading platform. And he's a true believer in Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. Like, he wants to turn everything into Bitcoin republics and whatever. You see on the network state cover, there's also the Bitcoin logo. Like, it's very important to him. It's his religion, basically. Network states are very influenced by cyber-libertarian thinking. And we talked about earlier, like, people here read a bit about cyber-libertarianism. Just how the cyber-libertarians love cyberspace because it's like this new frontier where you don't have to fight the existing power structures and rules and can claim this is a new space that we can colonize now and define new rules that don't need to be based on human rights or whatever. That's also what Balaji thinks. Like, it's not just, it's for him a canvas to build a new world. And it's not just the space to colonize, as in like forcing his regime onto the people living there. Like, he sees that as a blank slate where he builds a new world. It's not something that exists that he wants to expand. We're building a new form of being here. So how does a network state work? Well, network states are very silly things. They exist basically in cyberspace. They're not a state as in they don't have a territory, but you can just join them. Like, I'm now part of Malte's network state. So Malte now governs however he wants to govern, because I associate with his network state if I agree with whatever he believes. Which leads automatically to homogenization, because you don't have to kick people out because the people joining are all in the same club. You don't have to do the hard work. And if there's friction, if people disagree, they split. And like one of the network states, it's going to be bigger. That one's going to win, and their ideology won. It's not about pluralism and democratic conversation. It's about winning. And whoever wins rules the way they want to rule. Rules are basically just contracts. So anything is up for debate. If your network state wants to have slaves, that's fine. If everyone agrees, then that's democracy. And all systems are mediated through tech, which is blockchains and AI. Like everything is supposed to run on these two kinds of core technologies, and not democratic structures, bureaucracies, or whatever, for a bunch of reasons that we're going to get into. Many things tie to classical fascism, like you see homogeneity, a denial of human rights, a denial of democratic structures and structures that control power. But there's a difference in how they are framed. For example, homogeneity isn't by definition defined as racial or national homogeneity. Here, it's more about ideology, at least on first glance. No human rights being guaranteed. It's not labeled as that is they are decadent or foreign or whatever. It's labeled as they're inefficient, and like we need to be able to define new things because we're so evolved, technologies have changed, we need different rules. No democratic structures isn't said because that's the liberal governments that is bad. It's denied because it's inefficient, and we need to be efficient. It wants the same things, but it ties very different ideas to why these things need to happen. So it's never courts need to be removed. No, we just need more efficient systems to do these things. Let's talk about the guy with the egg-shaped head. That is Marc Andreessen, who wrote the Techno-Optimist Manifesto. Marc Andreessen founded Netscape and became very rich. And then he founded Andreessen Horowitz, which is the venture capital fund that Balaji worked at, and that has money in basically everything evil and shitty, like crypto, blockchain, AI. Andreessen Horowitz has money in everything, Meta, whatever you can think about. He also blogs, and this is where his book comes from. It's basically a blog post that he wrote, and it's the Techno-Optimist Manifesto. And Andreessen tells us where the future comes from, and that is from the techno-capital machine, which is basically tech companies doing whatever they want and the market deciding what is good. What this will bring, if we just let them do whatever they want, this will bring, quote, perpetual material creation, growth, and abundance. And this sounds like a religious argument for like paradise, but for him that is, but I think that is a shift in fascist rhetoric. Because, of course, fascists always loved futurism to a certain degree, but it was always about the past. We need to bring the past back. Now it's about we need to create the future, and without us, we can't create the future. They replaced restoration of the fictional past with innovation of the fictional future. Innovation has replaced restoration. It still wants a fascist state, but it's not looking back. It's looking forward, and everyone wants to look forward because that's progress. He also gives us this analysis that this progress, this undeniable good, is in danger because someone is lying to us. The us is a homogeneous group of people who want this techno-capitalist group. Some malignant outside is lying to us and is taking our birthright, which is not nationalism, but also not nationalism in a way. But who is lying? I mean, that's always the question. If someone's lying to us, we need to know who. Marc knows who's lying to us. Of course he does. Well, it's people who have ideas such as sustainability, trust and safety, ethics and tech, risk management, basically regulation, basically democracy. People who want to limit him in doing whatever he wants to do. And to get full fascist bingo, it's all the communists' fault, because those are all communist ideas, as we just learned. So if we get rid of all these processes, we can be, and that's his quote, great again, which way also connects back to fascist ideas of greatness coming somehow back by getting rid of all the structures. This whole narrative of tech fascism is a sleight of hand. What is framed as there's freedom to choose your association is a call to homogeneity. The narrative of the great future is just a variation of the great past to restore. It's both are fan fictions of bullshit, but it's framed in a different way. And the stories of a new order based on technology are just different ways of framing. We will take your rights and the structures protecting you, and we will do whatever we want because we can, because might is right. And all this, what this is, and this is my last slide, I'm bit over, AI plays a core role in this narrative because AI is promised as efficiency, removing bureaucracy, all these annoying shit that we don't want to do, finding magic solutions for hard problems, climate change, whatever. But that is the fascist trap. Because yes, democracy isn't efficient, but that's by definition. It doesn't need to be. That's not what it's built for. It's built to keep power in check, to give people the time and space to understand what's going on, give their input, and have their rights met. But we're replacing it with efficiency, and efficiency is AI. And that is the trap that tech fascism plays for us, and that puts us on the puts us on the path to a very dark future. It's the abolishment of democratic and social structures that mitigate power. And that power will go to leaders, which are tech leaders in this case, and can no longer be questioned, because no one knows how AI works, but it's true, of course. Thank you. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you so much, Tante. Are there any questions of, like, is there something that remains unclear in terms of, like, understanding? Just looking around. Okay. Then I would open up the debate, and I take the privilege of having the microphone for asking the first question. I did some research on you, and well, in your bio it already says you're a Luddite, and I know, Malte, you're also sympathizing with the Luddites. Are you a Luddite?
Yeah, I mean, define Luddite, but I would guess yes.
Great. Yeah, defining a Luddite would be my first question to you. What do you think, could you maybe say what a Luddite is? Because often it's perceived as something like people who don't like technology, but I know for a fact you both do like technology. Like Malte, you had a blog even reporting on like the new smartphone and its pros and cons.
Oh, and dark
deep
past.
cut.
And you are also working at the intersection of research and technology in your day job. So my question to you is, to both of you, and yeah, how would you define Luddism? And if you are a Luddite, you are, when did you become one? Have you always been? And what brought you to saying you are?
Luddism is also kind of avant-garde these days, in certain circles at least. Yes, I am one. What the Luddites were victims of a lot of propaganda, because like the government of Britain back in 18 blah blah blah, I'm bad with numbers, which makes me a great engineer, said, yeah, look, there are these people who are smashing our power looms, and they just hate technology and progress, and that's why we need to put the death penalty on destroying power looms. And that's kind of stuck. Like, Luddite these days is an insult. You're just a person who hates technology because you probably don't understand it. And it's like the idea of, Native Americans didn't like their picture taken because they thought it would steal their soul. Ha ha ha, they're so stupid. That is how Luddites are usually framed, but that's not true. The Luddites in Britain were the textile workers who realized when the power loom came about that the proto-capitalists back then would use these machines to make their working conditions worse, would make the potential power that they had as laborers who knew about the process worse, and would just lead to a worse life for everyone. So what the Luddites actually did was look at technology in what it does to the world that they live in. It's not promises of, yeah, but the power loom will at some point lead to magic futures, how AI is framed these days, but it's like, but what is it doing right now? And what they realize is it's making our lives worse. Now our kids also have to work, can no longer go to school, our wages go down, and if we say we're not okay with this, we lose our job. And that's why they started smashing certain types of machines, not because they hated the machines. They were the people who helped build the machines because they were the only people who knew how to make fabric. Like, they knew how the process worked. You can't build a machine without people who know the process. But they realized that this machine that externalized their knowledge would be used against them, not as kind of as a weapon, actually. And that's the way of, that's Luddite thinking of, here's a technology, and what does it actually do? beside from like the PR arguments of, yeah, it's going to bring the perfect future, blah, blah, blah. Like, what's it really doing? Like, look at AI, yeah, more data centers. Google's CO2 footprint doubled. Didn't go down, it doubled now, and it's just exploding. Microsoft has just gotten rid of all the climate goals they had. That's what a Luddite would look at. Not AI could at some point potentially do something. Right now, it's destroying the planet we live on, and that's where I keep my stuff. Could we just maybe leave this thing be? And that's Luddite thinking. And I think I wouldn't have called myself a Luddite a few years ago, because I also was kind of brainwashed by what I thought Luddism was. But Brian Merchant's book that Malte put out there kind of made things a lot clearer. It's a book well worth reading. There's also Gavin Mueller's Breaking Things at Work, Why the Luddites Were Right, Why You Hate Your Job. It's also a great book to read. And yeah, that made me take on that a bit provocative label, because people, when you say you're a Luddite, people say, you're what? I thought you were smart. And then you can get into a conversation about what the relationship of people to the technology surrounding them and structuring their lives and work environments actually is.
Yeah, to just add a little bit that the definition, I mean, Luddism, if you want to know what historically the movement was, you can read Brian Merchant's fantastic book. And I put it here because I sometimes expect the question when we talk critically about AI, people usually ask, yeah, but what can we do? I mean, there's one fantastic book by James Tyndall who says, well, for now I can suggest to not use these machines, but the reason why I would say I at least sympathize with the label Luddite, I would say that they had the radicality to actually do something. And that's a wonderful quote from Brian Merchant's book, who said, some machines must be broken to stop them from producing monsters. And AI is that kind of machine. And sometimes, I mean, in engaging in denial is great, but sometimes there needs to be more robust answers. I don't know if you know the book from Andreas Malm, How to Blob a Pipeline, basically a book about very robust resistance against infrastructure that's destroying our planet. I think that is what I find inspiring, because if anything, I would call myself a communist, but Luddism is obviously, it has a certain decisiveness about taking actions against technology that destroys our lives, at least to take them back and put them into good use, because obviously technological process could make our lives better. We could do the same thing in half a time, but obviously in capitalism we're doing the same thing but doing double, because then we are more profitable to be exploited.
And maybe to my second question, like just like personal reasons, it's something like you said you read the book, but how did this process come to be, like from reviewing smartphones to saying I'm a Luddite?
There was a point when I was actually primarily running a tech blog, and basically, the new iPhone, the buttons are a bit clicky, yay. That's what I did week after week. And eventually, I mean, some people, there's a saying that if you're 20 and if you're a communist, you're stupid, and if you're, I don't know, maybe it's the other way around, but I just found myself that becoming older, I realized that the lies of neoliberalism are just basically that, they are lies. I mean, it's feeding us a way of living that is unsustainable, and it's killing the planet and destroying our society. So, I mean, I guess I just started to read. I guess it was a day when I started to read Friedrich Engels, and I found it really convincing, and then I started from there. It's years ago, so.
Oh, thank you. Then, are there any other questions? Yeah, let's start.
Thank you both very much. I was wondering what you make of the friction between kind of like old school fascist nationalist concepts and the kind of post-nationalist, supranationalist, techno-feudalist cyberspace vibe that people like Varoufakis and Nathan Schneider talk about, and like to what extent they're aligned and to what extent they're competing, or how you see those two things interrelating.
From what I see, and I mean, this whole tech fashion thing is very much in flux and is very much developing and changing depending on, like, these people have the attention span of a goldfish, so things change all the time. But when they say, yeah, everyone's going to join up, and they say everyone, but of course they don't mean everyone. If you look at the people supporting this stuff, that's it's basically just dudes, and we know anything that only men like is not cool, and it's people who are either white or from India currently. Those are the two groups who say, yeah, everyone's going to join. Look, we have this cool, diverse crowd here, but there's already the beginning of arguments for which they say everyone can join, but then they start using AI and other data-based, rational, washed metrics of like, people in India have high IQs, so they should join our network state. So the kind of nationalist and racist things are coming in through the back door then. They're just washed through, yeah, but it's data-based. It's just, and there's never a case for, yeah, but we really need to make sure that we have actual representation of, I don't know, people of color, people of African heritage. That's never the case. Maybe a token person in there, here and there. So the real trick is they don't use the very nationalist language, which doesn't trigger the defense. Is that, yeah, we're just looking at there's maybe a test because we're trying to have great engineers here. So, and that sounds, at least at first glance, a lot more rational. But all these engineers are white or Indian males for some reason. So it's. I think there's not that big of an actual difference, but they just present it in a very different way.
I see there's a question over there. Maybe Yannis, you could give the microphone.
Thank you. Before the loop is over, I want to at least one question address at you regarding anti-fascism. So, although I don't agree with all AI being inherently fascist, I think let's assume it is. What does it mean for anti-fascist strategies to resist or to destroy or to find ways on how we can shape a different future together, being anti-fascist and having the logo on the t-shirt? So from your point of view, what can we do to stop this fascist AI?
Fantastic question. And sometimes people that are into tech want to find technical solutions for social issues. But that's not working. I mean, we will not fight fascism by fighting data centers. Fascism, as I tried to explain, is an ideology that finds its roots in capitalism. So if you want to be an anti-fascist, you have to be an anti-capitalist. I think it's a given. So the idea of private property, technology serving only profit interests, that's where we have to attack. And sometimes, I mean, attack sounds rather violent. I mean, that's where you at least start to ask questions. Because and that's what I think what you asked, the cyber libertarianism thing in your question, that's like the idea that capitalism is basically a system that always produces progress, but it's actually a market-based system that only produces things that are profitable. And if you want to live in a society that's not defined by what's profitable, but defined by what people need, then we are also thinking about a society that is inherently anti-fascist. So, I mean, if you look at the standard answers in reply to the threats of capitalism, socialization, deprivatization, one could talk about, well, there may be actually reasonable use cases for AI, so maybe we just socialize the data center infrastructure of Meta. Then we dismantle 90% of it because nobody needs that much data center, but the rest of the 10% we could use for, I don't know if you ever have heard of Project CyberSyn. It's a technological attempt in the 1970s by Salvatore Allende, the last democratically elected president of Chile, who tried to use a cybernetic control system to improve a non-hierarchical planned economy. And that would be something that if you're into tech, you can start about ways that tech can be used for a post-capitalist society. And I think that would be my recommendation to do.
I think just stealing Malte's presentation, that clicks a lot faster than mine did. It has animations. There's Dan McQuillan's book, Resisting AI, which he started writing this book, wanting to write a book about good uses of AI, and then he couldn't find them. So it ended up to be an anti-fascist book that is about resisting AI. But his last chapter basically answers exactly your question. And what I'm paraphrasing and summarizing it very briefly. It's not a long book. I can totally recommend it. Not that you can't read a long book, but you know what I mean. The idea is to not accept the narrative of AI is inevitable, and understanding that these systems, are by definition conservative, like they can't be something else, and that they are opaque, like they take away our ability to understand what's going on. And in democratic societies, that shouldn't exist. We shouldn't have processes where we can't look inside to see what's going on, who's in charge, who's making decisions, are these decisions made in our interest or in whose interest? So basically Dan's push is really to go for radical democratization of looking at tech. Like, why don't we have a stake in, why can Meta just buy some politician and put some data center somewhere? Elon Musk, for his Grok chatbot thing that is on X, the Everything app, runs in a data center in Atlanta, if I'm not, Atlanta or Memphis? Memphis. And it's a huge thing. It's basically in a neighborhood where mostly black people live. And the power comes from methane generators. He's just using unlicensed methane generators to poison black people, so people on Grok can ask, Grok, is this true? So every time someone on X, the Everything app, asks Grok, is this true? Some black kid is gonna get like a lung cancer or whatever, because that's just how the system is set up. Why can this happen? Why is this possible in any way, shape, or form? Why didn't people get asked? Why couldn't people say, yeah, that's not gonna fly? Where's the social value in that? And if we want to make an anti-fascist argument, I'd say this is where we need to look. Like, have diverse groups be able to make their voices and their needs heard and respect them. That's by definition anti-fascist. That's pluralist, that's democratic, and that is by definition anti-fascist. So I think that and maybe blowing up a few data centers, but that's just a hobby.
Okay, I think we have a couple more questions. Question here, question there. Any more fingers, just so I can like keep an order in my head? There. Okay, you're the one I saw first. So.
Okay, I want to make a little bit of a counter-argument to one of the claims that technology is making working and life conditions worse. I would actually argue that if you look at on a longer span of 50 or 100 years, you can argue working conditions got better for people. They have to work less and less hard jobs and less jobs that make people sick. Of course, there are still jobs that make people sick. That's not what I'm going to argue about, but also the second point of to just talk about AI itself, I think LLMs, these large language models, cause kind of a homogenization, but there are also other models, the AlphaZero model, which can calculate protein structures, and this was something very useful to find in medicine, to find new proteins to diseases, to fix them. And in that way I would argue that AI can be creative and find new things that humans would not have found without. And my question would be kind of what would you argue against these arguments?
I suppose I take the capitalist question, do you take the AI question? But I also would like, let's start with the argument that over the long run, everything got better. I mean, I don't know what you mean, but I didn't. I mean, the planet is on the brink of extinction and the third world is still exploited as hell. I mean, yeah, in this society, but we are the ones on a global scale that are the ones that are exploiting the world, and yet, yes, of course, there is capitalism has a tendency, the market has the power to develop technologies, but it's only technology that serves the capitalist logics. So the progress that we see is a progress that is always within the bounds of a system that is inherently discriminating between people, a system that always has people that own the means of our reproduction and the people that don't. And in order to overcome this kind of class differentiation, at least on a moral, a social argument, there is limits to the quality of life that capitalism can produce. But yeah, so that's the first one. And the second one, I mean, whenever you talk about AI and say you make fantastic arguments about how it is technologically working and why it's really bad, and then somebody comes up and says either medical stuff or like protein folding, or I think like analyzing X-rays. And I mean, that's why we define AI in a way that we can talk about it. If you have a very, very problematic thing that has 1 or 2% of probably not that bad use cases, and you use the same word for the 89% and the 2%, then every time you use the word, you are capturing the imagination of, there are good things, and transport it to the 89% of bad stuff. So that's why I think we have to start talking about AI in very different terms to be able to talk about the good stuff without making the other stuff seem good as well, because that's what we're doing. That's not good.
I think you're running in Solow's paradox, which is also sometimes called the productivity paradox. Solow was an economist, and he coined this term. You can see the computer everywhere, but in the productivity statistics. Like, digital technologies especially have not made us more productive. Like, it just didn't happen. Like, the statistics show that did not happen. And we all feel that. I don't know how your job is, but most people still work 40 hours a day, even though Keynes promised us in the beginning of the 20th century that it would be like 12. So if the productivity happened, the productivity gains, where did that go? Like, someone got that. Like, there's benefit that was created. Where did that go? It didn't go in our way. So I think the argument of, yeah, of course, we're not all living, we're not all having to like throw our bodies onto the machine so a capitalist makes money, but some of us are throwing their souls onto a machine. Like, if you read David Graeber's Bullshit Jobs, I think we're doing harm to our spirits and our souls and our societies by giving people 40-hour work weeks of bullshit jobs. That's the first argument. I think that if we measure like the technologist or the techno-optimist argument against what it supposedly does, it doesn't do that. It doesn't really enhance people's lives in the meaningful ways that are often claimed. And the other thing, as Malte said, it's a bit problematic. I think AI is a bit like asbestos. Asbestos is really great for specialists. If you need to build a fireproof suit for a firewoman who wants to save people in a burning home, asbestos is really good. It's a marvel. You don't want to put asbestos everywhere. We tried that. It's not cool. And it's if you think asbestos is maybe a bit crass an example, but I think it applies quite well, because when asbestos was developed, people thought, let's put this everywhere. This is great. It doesn't burn. That solves a lot of problem, because no one looked at what are the actual side effects of things. That's what we see with AI these days. Like, there's this thing that has a cute party trick that can be used in certain contexts with beneficial results, and then we throw it everywhere, and now studies are showing that we're basically melting our brains with it. So I think that the argument of, look, there's a good thing here, so we shouldn't criticize it, I don't think that holds. We need to be very specific about what is it that this thing is doing. And AI is a really problematic term in this regard, because AI doesn't mean shit. Like, AI means absent Indian a lot of the time. There's a guy in India typing when someone presents it as AI to you. There's not a defined meaning of AI. AI is a narrative that is sold to you. AI is as Ali Al-Khatib, I don't have the link here on the slide, wrote in his blog, AI is a political project of taking agency away from you and putting it onto centralized infrastructures. And what tech is in there doesn't matter. It's totally irrelevant. So if we want to talk about tech, we should use specific terms, like there's specialized machine learning models like AlphaFold. AlphaFold and LLMs have basically nothing in common, really. Like, they work fundamentally differently. They're very differently. But because AlphaFold worked, people look, LLMs are going to be smart. That's not reasonable. That's not rational. That's not a rational argument to be made, and that's not how we should talk about these technologies that have measurable and literal harms in the world.
I think...
I'm still going to be here afterwards. Okay. We can have a chat afterwards.
Exactly. I think I pass on the mic to someone from this side, maybe?
No, I was going to propose, because the loop is about to run out, and we want to kind of stick to the time, I want to propose to just do a round of questions. You can give very brief answers to all the questions, and then we close the session, and you can always talk to them at the bar later, if that's okay. So maybe we can just do a circle, because the order doesn't matter. You had a question?
Okay, so... Quick question. Do you think that maybe, or do you have considered that maybe we are overrating the role of AI here, and then maybe the mess we are in is completely covered in the first 4 or 5 slides from Malte, which basically does the connection between capitalism and fascism, and the reason we are in this mess, and this is on the slide of fascism on steroids, it's just because of the huge inequalities and these fantastic amounts of money and power these people have right now, and AI is just a random thing that came up where people can attach their little stories to get investor capital, but it's not really so special in it.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Me first? Yeah. Malte, so as you mentioned, Chile's experiment with computer-assisted planned economy. I wanted to ask especially Tante, because he said he's a Luddite, if that's a contradiction to your point of view. So I always viewed Chile's experiment as rather techno-optimistic and Luddites as rather techno-pessimistic, or is it that you only oppose automation under capitalism, and would you see value under for automation under communism, like for example other people like Aaron Bastani proposed in his fully automated luxury communism manifesto?
Oh, okay. My question is kind of the opposite of that one, which is, I was just wondering, you touched on this about the ecological impact of AI, and I just wondered if you could speak into how that relates to the fascism of AI, and whether that's one of the most useful routes of resistance we could have, maybe.
Thank you.
For me, it's still not quite clear. What would you suggest beyond like boycotting AI on an individual level? Because the severity of our problems is much bigger than that. And you're talking about like planned economy, like how are we going there? I know it's a difficult question. You're not gonna can answer it all. But are there like hopeful examples of collective organization, unionization that can give us a hopeful outlook, maybe?
Okay, there's one last question.
Okay, maybe last question? We'll see.
A short question regarding the connection of statistical approach and fascism. Before statistical approach, there were deterministic approach, which from my point of view, deterministic approach is much more fascist than actually statistics, which is based on data, and data is dynamic, meaning that it doesn't have any bias. So what would you, if not deterministic and not statistical, what it could be, which mathematical model?
Okay. Thank you so much for the questions. Now, short answers with an expansion at the bar.
So are we overestimating AI? Yes and no. As I said, that the problem, and to your question, was that basically we have to fight capitalism. That's the answer. But it's still a powerful narrative that drives the turn to fascism. So yes, we overestimate the importance, but I'm kind of no. Even though the question was related to you, cybersyn versus Luddism, I'm not saying that cybersyn is fantastic. I'm just saying it's an imaginative point that we can use as an example if we want to talk about tech in an emancipatory way, that might be an example, but there was obviously a lot of wrong with cybersyn. Fully automated luxury communism, I don't like that book. It's very techno-optimistic, but I have still 30 pages left, so I'm reading it right now because I have to for a book I'm writing. The ecological aspect for me is not really something I lean to a lot, because even if AI would be very cost and energy efficient, it would still be bad. And if we play into the ecologic part, we are making the argument that, yeah, but is it worth the environmental cost? No, I mean, even if it was very cheap to do and very energy efficient, it's still a bad thing. To your question, what to do, I mean, that's basically the question of transforming a society into something better, and the answer has nothing to do with AI, nothing to do with tech. It's organizing, it's political activism, it's getting into groups, starting political work, voting for the right parties, obviously, and it's a slow and tedious process, but a process that we need every one of you for. So, and the last question I didn't really understand, but you nodded, so I would leave that one to you with the statistic and mathematics part. I'm a lawyer, so I have no idea about math.
I almost failed the math part of the computer science study I did. Okay, is it maybe just capitalism? Yes, but the way that AI is presented by very powerful and very rich people right now, and how it is influencing how politicians are interacting. Like Sam Altman is being received in Europe like a head of state. Like he meets Ursula von der Leyen and she listens to what that motherfucker says. That is a problem. So I think the narrative of AI, which is the future magic technology, is politically so powerful that it influences a lot of how things work. And yes, that is in the context of capitalism. Capitalism is at the core of things. That's why Malte did this great first part. But I think AI and the narrative of AI is very influential right now, so we need to talk about what it does. Is cybersyn a contradiction to Luddism? I think when we talk about technology, we have this tendency to talk about the tech as if it was in a lab. Like we take the tech and we put it on the lab workbench and then we try to analyze it. But that's not how tech works. Tech works outside. I always say, like, in my communist utopia, like ChatGPT wouldn't exist, because why would you use it? Like, why would you have a shitty bot generate a shitty image? You would take your time and draw it, or talk to someone who can do it and have fun doing this together. No one would generate a song, because that is dumb and soul-crushing. So I think, like, looking at, is cybersyn a contradiction to Luddism? That depends on really the context of how it is deployed. Are people actually in charge of this thing? Who gets the benefits, if there are any, of this application? So I think it's a very complicated issue, and I'm not that much of a cybersyn expert that I could give you a definitive answer. How does the ecological impact relate to fascism? I mean, it is interesting how often, like, the negative effects of these systems are put on people in countries of the global majority. Like all the water that's being used for the cooling of these data centers, that's being used where there is no water, in Chile, in all different kinds of environments where people would like to have this water to drink and live and, like, have a school or whatever. So I think there is a connection there, that the negative impacts of these systems are being put on marginalized people, on the other. We don't want, I don't think that Elon Musk did it on purpose, because I have no idea what he does on purpose except for taking ketamine, but it's no coincidence that Elon Musk's power data center is in the middle of black people. That's just more than a hefty metaphor. So, and I don't think that it's irrelevant. I think it's not saying, pointing at the environmental impacts doesn't mean if that were gone, it would be okay. It's just saying, look, there's another avenue of cost that we're just accumulating. It's another externality that we have to look at. So I think it is important to point that out because people don't realize that these things that they just type in their phone have material impact on the world and our ability to live in it. Hopeful examples. I think certain things are happening, and it's a bit of an old example, but it worked, and it shows that organization works. The Hollywood authors striked for 180 days to get like AI provisions into their contracts so they wouldn't be forced to use this shit. And that worked because they had power and they organized. And not everyone has that power right now, but it shows that if we organize, that if we push politics, we can make things happen. The narrative of AI is we are without alternative and we will happen. And we can say, fuck you, no. And it sometimes works. Not all the time, but one too many Vietnams, you know. And the final question, is stochastic not less fascist than determinist stuff? The problem is stochastic, it's claimed to be on data, but data isn't neutral. Data is always already biased by definition because you always choose how to structure the data, which data to cast aside, which things to put into data, and how that data looks. So I don't think that it is less problematic than deterministic systems. Sometimes they're even worse because deterministic systems you can look at, okay, here's the discrimination machine, and look, here it looks at black people and treats them worse. The stochastic system does the same, but it can always claim, no, we're not doing it, it's just data, it's just the truth. And that's I think the qualitative difference that makes stochastic systems and data-based systems often more dangerous than explicitly fascist systems.
Thank you so much.
And thank you so much.
Thank you for the moderation.
Yes, thank you. Big thank you for all of you who came today, and also to the people in the live stream. And especially big thanks to our two guests, Malte and Tante. Also, thank you to the team who makes this possible, and to the streaming setup and organization.
And
just for the record, this tech thing was flawless, and I'm not used to that. That was really cool.
Yeah, and now a little advertising for next week's Loops. It will be the 10th of July at same time, same place, and we will welcome the Cluster Duck Collective, who will talk about memes mostly. They are a collective working interdisciplinarily between media studies, design, transmedia, and published a very famous meme manifesto, if you heard about it. But for now, we can just close the session and continue at the bar. Thank you so much for coming.